The Chairman and Ranking Member, and Secretary Lew, thanks for your great service to our country. I've been talking about Somali remittances for quite a long time, as you know. But as you also know, we have reached a frustrating point. Back on February 6th, the bank that was doing most of the facilitation of international transfers stepped out of the work, and now we're pretty much at the end of the line. What can your office do to try to facilitate these remittances?
Well, Congressman, you and I have discussed this a number of times. I know the deep concern you have, and we're very sensitive to the problems that you're trying to address. I believe you had a discussion recently with our acting undersecretary and discussed the issue at some length. I think that the challenge is, and I don't think there's any disagreement on this, we all want to stop the flow of money to bad actors.
Of course.
No disagreement on that. I think we also all agree that people who are just trying to send money to their family members who are not bad actors, it is heartbreaking that they can't do so easily.
Forgive me, Mr. Secretary, but I must say it is heartbreaking, and I agree. But it's also, I think, a national security problem for the United States, and here's why. Because the narrative of al-Shabaab is the United States is your enemy. Look, they won't even let let your cousin send you some money for school fees or for food. Don't worry about it. We'll give you the money. All you got to do is be our soldier. That's another factor that I think we absolutely cannot ignore. It's a humanitarian crisis, but we are also playing into the narrative of a terrorist organization. And I would like it if you guys would start thinking of it in both of those ways, not just a humanitarian way.
I mean, the challenge is, while we strive to be clear, and we will work with you to be as clear as we can what the requirements are, what the rules are, we do not tell banks or financial institutions they cannot participate in this.
You know, Mr. Secretary,
but we also can't give a hold harmless to a firm at the same time.
Well, here's the thing.
So it's challenging.
Well, but see, okay, so we have a situation where we need some creativity. And that's what I'm asking you for.
We'll continue to work with you and try to be as creative as
well. Let me ask you this. There was a bill there was legislation that was passed that created a safe harbor, but was opposed by Treasury. In light of the difficulty, would you guys at least go back and look over a potential legislation that could allow these transactions to go forward and would prevent the money from going to terrorist organizations?
We will look at whatever proposals are forthcoming, including looking again at things that we've looked at in the past, and we will work with you to be as creative as possible. Earlier in the hearing, we were talking about financial institutions that are trying to avoid any risk by by saying they're not going to do activity at all, as opposed to doing it in a way that complies. I think we have a challenge of making clear what the rules are, but that doesn't mean that it's saying no activity at all. Financial institutions are responsible for knowing what they're doing.
But you know what, Mr. Secretary, with all due respect to what you're saying, if you listen to the banks, they would say that we want to do the transactions, but the level of regulatory burden is just so high, and the level of so I mean, you're saying you're not stopping them, but they're saying it's more of a wink and a nod that you are stopping them. I mean, and you're in communication with these banks too, and so I find it a little bit frustrating when I hear our federal agency says, "Oh, we're not stopping them from doing transactions," but the banks say, "You're not saying we can't do them, but you're creating an environment where we can't do them."
The cases are not all the same, and I certainly don't mean to compare Mexico and Somalia, but we've made progress with Mexico, working with the Mexican government and the financial institutions, where they're raising their level of scrutiny so that they're able to avoid having the shutdown in correspondent relationships they were worried about. I think Somalia is a much more challenging environment, obviously. We will work with you on this issue.
I only got 35 seconds, so let me ask you this. I think one solution is to stand up a Somali banking system that meets international requirements to stop money laundering. We're sending them money for the Amisom troops to fight al-Shabaab. What about sending them some financial help to set up a system where they can have a system that is trustworthy on international standards?
I'm happy to look at that.
Well, 7 seconds to go. I'm sure there's something I could be able to say. But Thank you, Mr. Treasury Secretary. We'll be in touch.